And start witty banter.
Okay.
And we're not frozen. No.
I refuse to look down. Every time we go live, I'm always looking down at my phone.
You are,
I
yeah.
see the stream.
Just hold your phone up just like.
That's great.
Like that's exactly how it works.
Mark, once we're live, but we're just going to let some people get on. So if you're just getting on, thanks for coming on. This is the witty banter that has made us so famous every Wednesday.
This is really what the people come for, is the witty banter. They don't
Martin
care.
Wilkes is here already.
It's all about the witty banter.
Wow. Martin Wilkes joined us.
Speaking of
I'm looking
Florida.
at my phone.
Martin.
My phone stopped.
Yeah.
I can't get my applause button. It's not. I got some applause buttons, and so if you say something funny, I don't think I can use them though. I don't think I can incorporate it in, but
There you go.
Thank you. It's hard not to say thank you when you hit the applause button, to just sit there like. Should we begin, guys? Rich, you're the boss. You want to wait a second?
Wait, give us like 30 more seconds here.
Okay, that's okay. I want to pull it up on Facebook. Somebody say something brilliant for the people watching here. So Mark, this is you are back in your office now, right?
Correct.
And that's
Correct.
where we're gonna do today's.
Yeah, I decided we've got part of our class going through the morning. We're running a little different kind of schedule this year, so I figured the best way for me to be able to really demo something was to clean some space off my desk in my office and make it into a demo bench. So that's kind of what I've tried to do here, and we'll just live from the office at the WCC lab, I guess.
Man, it looks good, and I like the camera up on top. That's really a good idea, and that's going to be, I think Ryan will probably be pinning that guy, and we'll be able to see that. That's cool. In fact, can you pin that, Ryan? Can we see it? I didn't see that.
We can. I can do a little spotlight on it. Bring it to the forefront. See. There we go.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Yeah,
that's nice. And Mark can even zoom in too. So here we go. Watch this. Ready?
Okay, there we go.
Ready for my close-up. And any moment now.
Come on.
It's gonna happen. When it does.
No pressure, Mark. No pressure.
Technical failure right off the bat.
Awesome.
I think it's zoomed in enough. I think it looks pretty good. You
can always get a little bit closer. Just kind of get up in there and.
Yeah, I can move things up if I have to.
That looks good.
That looks great.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm used to being able to do that because that's a lot of how we deliver how we do some of our content. I can put what I'm doing AirPlay onto a larger screen, and then we can demo something up close, what we're trying to work with and do.
Cool.
Yeah, it was cooperating a minute ago, and now it doesn't want to.
It looks good. It looks good enough. Technology, schmology. Yeah. That's why they run.
And a technological failure, as anybody, if I don't know if I'll have any recent graduates on here, but I'm sure they would attest that any kind of technological failure is nothing new. So we'll work around it.
Awesome. All right, cool. What do you say, Rich? Can we start?
I think we're good to go.
We're good to go. Okay, let's officially start. Mark, if I can, in keeping with tradition, I'm going to introduce you, in keeping with our Wednesday wisdom tradition. Usually you're introducing me, but in keeping with tradition, I'm going to introduce you. So about that, I'll just say, the reason you're introducing me is because I've every other year, you have a 2-year program at Western Iowa Tech. This is Mark Schmedinghoff, and he's going to talk about padding today. And we all know who he is. He teaches at Western Iowa Tech, which we all affectionately call WIT. I have the pleasure every other year of going to Western Iowa Tech, and I usually pick a cold time, but I want to go in the warmth. But I get to meet the students, and I go to all the repair schools in the country, and I particularly like going to Western Iowa Tech. There's a few things about the school that set it apart from the other schools. not the least of which is the great tutelage of Mark Schmedinghoff, who is an honest, caring, down-to-earth, open-minded, thoughtful guy who also happens to be a great teacher and a great technician. So all the students at the school, I really feel I feel like they get a great thing from you, Mark. But there's a couple things about it, and I think because of who you are, that there's a great environment there, and there's also a cool environment because it's a 2-year program, and some of the other programs are shorter, and not to compare them, but this is a 2-year program. It's the longest program in our industry, and all that comes with that. Mark, I want to say, by way of introduction, that one of the things I love about going to your school is that I love the cohesiveness of the students. I think that the kids are really honest and open, and no one's afraid to ask a question. And there's always plenty of questions when I go, and you can tell that everyone feels like it's safe, that it's a safe place to share ideas. And I know without a doubt that that's because of your attitude, your personality, your teaching style. And I know that you came into a school with a long tradition of training great technicians. So there's a ton of students that have come out before you, and there's a ton of students since you that have had a lot of success. You've had really great placement. Your students get jobs, and I think everyone's really lucky to have you and to have Western Iowa Tech, and anybody that's checking this out that's thinking about going to a repair school. You would be doing yourself a big disservice if you didn't consider Western Iowa Tech as the place to go and spend 2 years, go in without any knowledge and come out as a beginning repair technician ready to hit the ground running. So at that, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thanks so much. And you're going to talk about padding today. So thanks so much for coming out here and doing what you do.
Well, thank you, Curt, and thank you the rest of the MusicMedic team. This is really fun and really a really neat opportunity, and I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on. And Curt, thank you for all those words of introduction. Welcome, I guess, in a way, to Western Iowa Tech. We are located in my office today because we have a lab group going outside, and our second instructor, Dwight Van Tol, is holding down the fort today while I talk with you guys a little bit. With half of our group. As Curt said, I won't spend too long talking about the program and things here, but this is my 11th year out here. Time has flown. This is my 11th year out here in Sioux City, Iowa. Beautiful downtown Sioux City, and as Curt said, we all managed to get through the winters. If I set it up where we did saxophones earlier in the year, Curt, I could get you out here before it gets cold in January and February. But we all manage, and we all survive it. But a 2-year program, the oldest of the 3 currently operating schools. I don't have the exact start date, but I think we're getting pretty close to a 50th anniversary of this program. So it's been around quite a while, and as Curt said, I'm privileged to take over a place that has put so many spectacular technicians into the field for so long, and to be able to be part of that and continue that tradition is a great honor for me. It's of course a little different this year, and I am going to, for all of us, we're running a bit of a hybrid schedule with half of our group in at a time, and so I think as we're all adjusting and trying to do what we can through a bit of a crazy time. I know all 3 schools are doing that right now, but we're doing everything we can to continue to do a hands-on program in the midst of a pandemic, and I think everybody's hanging there pretty well with that. And Curt, I'll say a couple things just from my perspective. Number one, I think what you're doing here to keep some education going through this time via Facebook Live, Zoom, all of these tools that we have, as quirky and weird as they are, this is a great thing. And I appreciate you and your team setting all this up and getting it out there for people. You've had some spectacular, I looked back through the YouTube archive just a little bit. You've had some really great people. and some really cool topics going out there. So I appreciate you guys doing this and keeping this going in the time we're in right now. One of the things that's hard for me as I think about this kind of thing, you and I have talked when we're out here before. I'm a saxophone player, but I don't know that I have a specialty when it comes to repair, right? I don't feel like I have something that I'm just that's kind of my little niche or whatever. But what I get to do is I get to deal with 20 beginning techs, 10 in a 2-year program. We're kind of split at the same time. So right now it's even. I have 10 and 10, first year and second year. But I get to deal with 20 beginning techs and get them off the ground and get them through some basics. And so part of what I thought about doing today was to talk about some of the things that I see throwing beginning techs for a loop in terms of saxophone padding, and maybe some of the tricks we can talk about getting around that. You guys obviously do all kinds of work on this sort of thing, so you have a lot of insight to share as well. And Curt, I know every time we get to have you out here, by the time you're done, our heads are all spinning, mine included, and we spend a good part of the next day going, well, so what was he talking about there? So I hope
it's from too many drinks at the pizza place.
That's it. No. That's heads pounding, not heads spinning.
That's right.
But so my hope today was to kind of go through some pretty basic kind of stuff, but talk about some of the things that trip up our students and some of why these things do, and maybe some of the solutions that are out there that might help. And so that was kind of the idea of what I was going to go into. So what I have for today, what I thought I'd start with today, as far as a couple quick things just by way of introduction, the instrument I'm dealing with here is a Yamaha Advantage student level alto sax, right? And again, I know you all at the Pro Shop, you don't see a whole lot of Yamaha Advantages, right? And some of where I'm coming from in terms of what we do at the college, I have the privilege and the challenge at the same time of we're going to send people all over the country into all sorts of different kind of repair shops and different kind of repair environments. So I have to prepare them for whatever. If there are things that I tell them all the time. There are things that I would do if I were training you to work in my shop. I would say you will do this. Except I'm not. I'm setting you up to go into all kinds of different shops. And so I have to say, well, here's one way to do it. Here's another way to do it. Here's another way to do it. And we'll talk more about that. But since I don't have a whole bunch of high-end pro saxophones around here, I figured we would just deal with our good old standard student Yamaha and see what we could do a little bit today.
Cool.
So I guess to get into things a little bit, I was trying to think about what kind of stuff in terms of padding throws our students for a loop and causes them problems that they then sit there and say, well, this isn't working. And we have to say, why? Oh, maybe it was because of this. Something as simple as picking the right size pad, maybe. And to give you an idea, I pulled this one out. This is as I said, it's an Advantage. It's one of our college-owned instruments. And we use this one primarily for situations where I or Dwight, our other instructor, one of us messes a few things up on it and hand it to them and say, go fix it and see what, whatever the challenge is. So this is probably a pad that was replaced by a student on our low E flat key here. And if you look closely, I'm going to try to get this up close to the camera, right? There's a pretty good sized gap around the outside of that pad, right? This pad's too small. This isn't the size pad we want to work with, right? This pad is too small. And when you don't have, or if it's mushroomed in because you mashed in too large of a pad, or if you've grabbed too small of a pad and you're trying to float that around and it's shifting sideways as you try to float it, you're going to cause yourself a whole bunch of extra problems. So I think for starters, we'll get this too small pad out of there and talk about some ways to correct it. I'm going to use a variety of heat sources. We're going to come back to that in a little bit, but I'll start with an acetylene torch for starters, just in the name of speed. And we'll get this remnants of get this pad out of here. Let's go. Come on. Or, yeah, I'll use my other end of my hook there. See what sort of adhesive we have under here. Just a little bit of curiosity there. Oh, looks like your standard shellac. But we'll get this key cup done and cleaned out. And now we can take a look a little bit at what we have for some choices. It's still a little warm, but I don't know about you guys. I've grabbed so many hot things at this point, it doesn't really matter. But
I don't even use oven mitts anymore.
I'm sorry?
I don't even use oven mitts anymore.
Right. Yeah, I did. My family kind of laughs at me. So, but it's definitely the case. So one of the just as far as pad sizing goes, most shops, I don't know, Curt, you can help me on this one, but I know for a while, probably when I first took over, we still had suppliers and shops that were selling pads in 32nd of an inch sizes, or shops that were inventorying them in 32nd of an inch sizes. And most, I know you've always done it in 0.5 millimeters, which I appreciate. And I think most of shops have gone over to that. I don't know if that's a fair statement or not, based on your observations.
I think there's only one company in America that makes pads in 30 seconds. I think millimeters are the standard now.
Yeah,
yep.
that's good. That's good,
Yeah.
because you just wouldn't have the choices from a 30-second standpoint. So a couple other stars of the show today, right? These are obviously very familiar to you. These are your tan saxophone pads, plastic resonators. It's kind of our default pad here. And let's see. So yeah, this is probably kind of what happened the first time somebody grabbed this pad, sort of looked around, thought, yeah, that's pretty close, except we still have those gaps, right? That is a 39 millimeter pad. Let's see what 39.5 does for us. Still a little small. Still a little small by my standards. 40. Oh, I think I like that better. Right? I don't have any sort of lateral motion. Right? I've gotten rid of my gap. I think I could probably work with 40. It's not and it's kind of a subtle difference. Even going half millimeter sizes, 40.5. Right now, I'm having to squish this one just a little bit. Right? It doesn't quite make it all the way in there. Now I can mash it and I can make it work. Right? But then I'm not going to have my room for adjustability later. I'm going to cause myself some problems there. With the students and with what I work with the students, if I have to mash them in at all, I'm probably not going there. I don't know what your thoughts on it are, but generally I'm going to say, if I'm going to err, and I don't want to err, I want to get it pretty well dead on. And I feel like in this case, my 40 millimeters is pretty well dead on because I'm not moving sideways. But if I'm going to err, I'd rather err on the small side just a tiny bit than on the large side. I really don't want to try to mash it in there. Thoughts and observations, obviously, from you guys are welcome. But
I agree with you. I agree with you, Mark. But I would actually say it different. So What you just did was you put a pad in there, and then you had to pull it out with your fingers.
Sure.
And you said I'd rather err on the small side, and so I would call that pad a little bit large because it's a little bit tight fitting in. The one that you smashed in, I agree, it's too big. The one that you pulled out with your finger, that's the way I would choose it. But I would think a pad that went in and then fell out might be a little. I would say that would be erring on the small side. But like verbiage aside, I totally agree with what that I think, and it is a hard thing. You can only talk about it and show it.
Yeah, exactly. So much of what we do in repair of any kind is something you have to develop by feel, right?
Amen.
And so much, and that's where you mentioned the 2-year program, and I'm just grateful for the 2-year program, honestly. Here, my colleagues at the other schools are amazing instructors, and they do an incredible job. And I don't know how they squeeze all of that into a 1-year program. I just cannot. I can't wrap my head around. I went through a 1-year program. I graduated from Renton before I got as I got into repair, but that second year is absolutely critical. Yeah, Rich, you've got pulled up there sort of the outline of the program, and I can tell you a little bit. Forget the schedule right now. That's all completely. That's all.
Welcome to 2020.
Exactly. What I can tell you is that first year, we're going to spend a lot of time with your 5 basic rental instruments, right? The fall is clarinet, trumpet, flute in that order. The spring is typically saxophone, trombone, and reviewing what we do from the first. That's kind of woodwind repair and brass wind repair 1. And then we do a little bit of sort of an overview of the industry and some safety, some shop safety as well. A little bit of case repair and some lathe work in the spring semester of the first year. The small parts machining course is kind of building some small tools, that kind of thing. And then the second year builds on that, but we spend a lot of time with, we spend some time with double reeds. We spend some time with bass clarinets, piccolos, some of the harmony woodwinds. We do a little more in terms of machining, do some tenons and tone holes on clarinets. We spend a little bit of time with large brass as well as French horns through the course of the second year, and a little tiny bit of orchestral strings, just like basic setup kind of stuff. So it gives us some time to get into that kind of stuff, which I really appreciate. Anyway,
yeah, so that 2 years. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for going through that schedule. That's great. It's a great program.
Thanks for pulling that up. I don't, I wanted to. We're lucky to have it, and I'm grateful to have it, and I think it gives us an opportunity to do a few things that I think are important. I know I had the experience of kind of getting dropped into the fire out of the 1 year program, and even out of the 2 year program, you're going to get dropped into the fire a little bit. That's just the nature of learning repair. But I know I had some things that I definitely look back at my 5 years in the shop in Springfield before I got here. And say that was the stuff I had to learn the hard way, and I want to make sure these folks leave knowing it, and not have some of those experiences. Questions, comments to this point, I guess.
There's a whole bunch of people saying hello.
Oh,
people that went to Western Iowa.
I have a bunch of graduates on. Well, I'm not seeing the Facebook feed this point. That's too much for me to try to keep track of on top of what I'm doing. But hi, everybody, and good to hear from you. I'll have to go back and watch that or see that somehow. That'll be fun. Anyway, I guess back to this for a minute, and now that we've gotten sort of our pad diameter size situation. The other thing that's probably worth mentioning is thickness. And this is one that you guys can comment on as you build them, etc. But one of the things I've always appreciated, and one of the reasons this is kind of our default pad here, is that you're dealing with a pad that's a little bit thinner than some, right? You've got 160 thousandths thickness versus 180, which is just another pad we had in stock here. And that 20 thousandths may not sound like a lot, but I know I personally had some experiences where that 180 thousandths was too big. And if I have to start bending key work or adjusting, causing some other sort of problem because I'm dealing with a pad that's thicker than what I really want in there, I don't want to go down that road if I can help it, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that road. And if it's too thin, right, if I feel like I don't have enough thickness, I can always add enough adhesive or shim something up. I can always make it thicker. It's a lot harder to make it thinner. Without causing some other mechanical problems. So this, I guess, is why why we've defaulted here to these pads, just to sort of make that point. We can build it up with adhesive, we can build up the thickness if we need to, but we don't need to go and but making it thinner is going to be a tougher thing to do. Curt, thoughts on that?
I agree, Mark, and I think the only thing you can do is bend if it's too thick, or you can cut the leather off the back.
Right.
But it's nice to have the exact right thickness pad too. So, but if you're gonna, I agree. Yep.
And some of that probably is what we're dealing with here. If I would imagine from the little bit of experience I have with a bunch of vintage horns, you probably are needing some thicker pads on some of those, rather than the 160s. Most of what we're seeing and most of what I'm working with, the 160s work pretty well. And I think it probably goes without saying, and of course I'm talking with you all and using your pads here, but the pad itself, a good quality pad matters. I'm pretty picky about that, and I spend a good chunk of college money on getting decent pads, not just for saxophones, for anything, just because I don't want students fighting potato chips. It's too hard. It's too hard, even if you've done this for a while. It just doesn't it just doesn't work. So a good quality pad that's going to be reasonably flat. Nothing's perfectly flat, but reasonably flat, that you can work with a reasonably flat tone hole is going to work in your favor. From there, we can go into a little bit about adhesives, different varieties of adhesives. I'm going to make sure I throw something on over here. And again, this is one of those situations where if I were training people to work in my shop, I would say this is what you will use. And but I'm training people who are going to go all over the place, and they're going to go somewhere and somebody's going to say, oh, we pad everything with French cement. And I'm going to say, okay, so I want you to know what French cement is, right? Even if I personally hate it, which I do. I want you to know what French cement is and how it behaves and how it reacts, so that if you land in that shop where that's all they use, you know how to handle it and work with it and deal with it. So as part of that, we get to spend a lot of time with a lot of different adhesives. And one of the things that we discover about that is they all behave just a little bit differently. They all have a little bit of a different, let me make sure I have the pad I'm working with here. They all behave, they all have a little bit of a different plastic range. They all heat up and start to water out or melt out at a different temperature. And you just kind of have to get used to that and figure out which one is which, or which one behaves in what way. But that's going to change a lot of how your floating process works depending on what adhesive you're using. So one of the things we make a good point with the students is to get used to a variety of them. Let's see. I pulled a few things here. You guys sent me a little bit of the hot glue. I'm not going to wade into hot glue versus shellac, because that's I don't have a whole lot of, I'm just not going down that road today. But that's a personal preference thing. But it's what you're comfortable with and what you feel like you can do good work with and get good results with, ultimately, is that matters, I'd say, from my perspective on that. Let's see, for this one, what shall we use here? Curt, what do you want to highlight? I've got a couple different varieties of shellac to work with. Your synthetic, your clear shellac, just a regular amber shellac, the hot glue that you guys are working with there. And I do have off screen, and it's warming up, and I should have switched it on beforehand, but I do have my Z gun ready to go.
Nice.
Well, yeah, I got to let you choose. I always choose the clear one because it's clear.
Do the clear.
Just from a cleanup standpoint?
Yeah, and I'm messy, and so I choose the clear.
It was in the context of soldering, but I always appreciated from Wayne Tanabe the statement that you were either good at soldering or you were good at cleaning up, and I happen to be good at cleaning up, and that's probably true from a padding standpoint too. Let's work with clear shellac then. And for now, I'll stick with my acetylene as a heat source. This is just an acetylene torch, the Smith acetylene torch, and you have multiple sizes of tips available. What I have on here is a number 0 tip. This is what we have at the benches in the lab. And we find that the double zeros work pretty well for small woodwinds. The 0 tips work well for larger woodwinds, saxophones, and we reserve the 1 tips for doing large scale solder operations. I'll come back to heat sources in a minute a little bit, but we'll work with this for now, and let's see if we can heat this up. A couple different ways to go about adding your adhesive, but the critical, so a couple things to think about. 1, how are you going to get your adhesive in the pad cup? And 2, how much? And a lot of this is more of a feel thing. In this case, I'll go ahead and melt some into the cup here, just by heating up your shellac, my shellac, which happens to be your shellac. And I'll just try to, what were you saying about being messy? I'm just dripping it on the bench here. I'm going to try to make sure I get enough going there.
So Mark, you're heating up the cup and dribbling the stick, heating up the stick and
A
applying
little
it.
bit of both. Yeah. And that's a question of how do you go about doing that? I'll often do a little bit of both. That's a couple ways. There's a couple ways to go about it. In this case, I'll do a little bit of both on there, and my goal is to end up with enough shellac to completely cover the back of this. All right. If I go too much less than that, I'm going to be, I've got to have enough surface to be able to make some adjustments, enough shellac to be able to make some adjustments and float back and forth. And in this case, we'll get that, keep that fairly warm, and then just drop our pad in and do a little bit of a twist just to sort of distribute the shellac around a little bit there. Right, just so that I have hopefully an even layer underneath that. Right, whatever adhesive I'm dealing with, whether we're talking about shellac, whether we're talking about hot glue, whether we're talking about Jolly Rancher, yes, we've used that as a pad adhesive before. I can't discuss flavors of Jolly Rancher one versus the other, but we have we did a couple of years ago, just test it, and it does work.
That's awesome. That's worth the price of admission right there.
Right there. Hey, there's
yeah. Wow.
Jolly Ranchers is a pad adhesive. No,
wow.
I won't spend too long on the story, but we were discussing the failure, the statement, sorry, about shellac and failing in cold weather, and so
Right.
added a key with a Jolly Rancher, and then one of our students was working in a grocery store, and so she took it and left it in the freezer overnight at the grocery store, and it was just fine. Nothing happened to that pad. It was perfectly acceptable. So
that's
anyway, that little bit of a fun story from years back there. Sorry about the side diversion there, but enough adhesive, right? Enough adhesive, and enough adhesive that you're not going to end up with something watering out. I probably, as I look at this one, I don't have enough protrusion here. I probably needed a little more. So I'd rather than go back and redo that, I think I'll move on. But I probably am looking at it saying I don't really have enough pad protrusion. I probably needed to dry fit and check it first. But I could probably so I may be able to work with that. But I probably needed to have a little more in there to work with. Thoughts, comments, observations, I guess at this point.
Yeah, Mark, is there any benefit to applying? Terry's asking. Is there any benefit to applying the adhesive to the cup versus the pad itself, or is that a personal
I think that's
preference?
just a personal preference, to be 100% honest. I can't think of any, and I'll mention, we can do this real quick because I can pull another key here, and we
and then what flavor of Jolly Rancher? That I think everybody is.
To be honest, I'm trying to remember. I think it was grape, but you may not be able to quote me on that. I may have to get in touch with that class and try to remember which one we used, but I do think it was grape. It was either grape or maybe it might have been watermelon.
I would say watermelon is clearly.
I would go with watermelon as well.
Sorry?
That would be my guess.
All right. 39 for this one. That's even too big. What have I got that's going to work for this key? Okay. Well, since I don't seem to have the appropriate size pulled for my C key, that's close, sort of. We'll talk through this method without. The other option is to drop it on the pad, and this works, right? There's no real harm done here. If I'm doing it this way, I'm going to try to make sure that I get enough shellac to fill the center section of my pad. All right. To fill the non-leather section of my pad pretty completely, and we'll build this one up a little better since I probably didn't get enough on the last one. And with the standard, I'm a little, well, with the standard amber or with the standard shellac, then this is why the steel block's handy, because then once I have that there, I can press that and the block cools things a little bit. And now I have a pretty solid, I'll pull that up there a little bit, but now I have a pretty solid layer throughout the back of the key there, throughout the back of the pad there, that I can then warm my cup a little bit and add that to. And I'm mashing this one because I didn't happen to have the correct size pad. Handy, but does that make sense a little bit? Does that help to answer the question there?
Yeah.
Is there a benefit to one or the other? I don't know. I personally, I think default to heating the cup when I can. Now, if you're dealing with a pearl, that may be a slightly different, if you're dealing with the F sharp key, right? That's got a pearl on it in the middle of it that you want to be careful of heating. Maybe that makes a difference there in how you approach that one. I think I'm a little skittish because I had a slightly traumatic experience with a hot glue gun and a saxophone pad that I was holding in my hand, and it slipped and I accidentally went to grab it with my thumb and burned my thumb pretty nicely at one point on the bench. So that for me, that holding the putting it into the cup leaves me out of having to hold the pad and risk that one. But that's a personal preference thing. I don't know that there's a benefit either way.
Thanks, Mark. Yep.
A couple other things then we can talk about in terms of working with it. We were working with adhesives a little bit. Again, it's a lot of this becomes a heat control game, right? A lot of this becomes then as we go on. As far as adhesives go, the things that are tripping people up on that typically are along the lines of not enough, right? Not enough adhesive. I don't see too many cases when it's too much. When you have a problem with too much adhesive, it's usually when it squeezes out and waters out on you, and that's more of a situation of heating and not knowing how your adhesive is behaving in some ways than it is a situation of not knowing. Of having too much adhesive. It's a matter of overheating it rather than overfilling it, if that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about, maybe we can go into a little bit, since it is kind of a heat control game, let's talk a little bit about some different methods of heating things. I'm going to go ahead and put this E flat key back on, since we've got a pad in it, but we'll kind of come back to it because what I wanted to mention a little bit here had to do with heating things, because one of the things that I find that one of the things that we struggle with a little bit here with the students is learning our heat control with our acetylene and not taking too many saxophone pearls with us. My front F key on this one is a pretty good example of one that maybe got a little too close to the heat and got a little torched.
Oh yeah.
And that's not as bad as what usually. Usually I'm in a spot where I have a stock of a couple different varieties of horns, these Yamahas, a bunch of Jupiters, and I can keep pearl sets on hands for those because I know we're going to lose a few pearls. I've got, personally, I got to where I felt pretty good about being able to heat a key with a pearl, right? F sharp being the main culprit on the right hand. But I got pretty good at feeling like I can heat a key with a pearl with a torch and not burn it. But that's a hard thing for students to learn. It goes back, and I'm going to quote this one straight out of your article on the website, Curt, which I use quite a bit. But the things to know about your torch: number one, it's too hot, and you're absolutely right, it is. And number two, know where your heat's going, right? If I want to heat this, it's going to rise. If I want to try to heat this, I may not do it right now. But if I want to try to heat this key with a torch, I'm going to set this up so that wherever my torch is, what's above it is clear, right? If I set it up in this orientation, where what's directly above it is the backside of my B flat pad, I'm going to toast something, right? If I set it up where the pearl is, if I set it up in this orientation where the pearl is above the arm of the key, which is where I'm going to aim my flame at this point, I'm going to melt my pearl because the heat's going to rise. If I can set it up in an orientation where neither of those are true, let me see if I can turn this sideways. I can turn my torch, and I might as well light it for this, and let's see if I can manage to not burn it. That'd be a nice day, wouldn't it? But
if you do burn it, it will be real exciting.
Oh, sure. Yeah, everybody's gonna love that. Right, but if I can then heat the arm of my key back here where my heat's not going to go straight up into something else, right? And I should probably watch that round spring there that I'm about to melt and lose my tension on, right? But however, I'd probably go with a slightly smaller torch as well. You run into some challenges here, and we run into it because we have to think about where that heat's going and how we're going to manage that. Luckily, we have some alternatives. And some alternative ways of heating heat cups and making things happen a little bit. You guys, I have to I don't know, not continue to butter you guys up at MusicMedic a little bit, but I have to say,
It's quite all right.
all right, that's part of the deal.
Thanks,
here.
Mark.
You're welcome.
We love us too.
You guys sent me one of these.
Awesome.
Good.
We've had
Awesome.
air torches at the lab before. Ours from a couple years ago kind of died. I had not seen the new and improved version of this, and I am impressed. I am thoroughly impressed. You all have put some thought into this clearly, and it is a truly nifty little piece of equipment. So, and particularly, I've always using this sort of thing has always been helpful if you're dealing with plastic pearls on a left hand section, right? Where you're sitting there, I've got to heat my B key, or I've got to heat my C key, and I've got to heat B, or I've got to heat C, and I've got to do that without melting all this stuff or burning the felts under here or whatever else. This little piece of equipment is marvelous for that, and you have so much the things you've done with the controls. You've added so many options here. I love this thing already. I've had it for less than a day.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark.
But Mark, you were familiar with that type of style of heating already, is that right?
That is correct. Yes. Yeah, we've had. I mean, I've worked with them before. You brought us on one of your early visits, Curt. You brought us an air torch, and we got to work with it for a little while and got to really like it. And then they kind of wore out. But I think you've solved some of the issues that you had with the first generation with this variety. I flew to the factory. That's what I did. I flew to the factory and I worked with them, and I went in there and went through it. But it's Wednesday Wisdom. It's not a MusicMedic commercial, but since you are buttering us up, I could mention that is how those improvements happened. I got my happy little butt on a plane, and I landed in China, and I worked with them, and we made the cord longer and the inside better and the motor better and the heater more stout. We added the do re mi features and the automatic. You can leave it on there, and it's got the turn it on, and all that was stuff that some of it was stuff that they had, and some of it what they didn't. And we asked them to, or I asked them if they could do it, such as the fireproof cord, the extra long silicone cord. Even just to be able, the amount of reach you now have with this is significantly better than it was. Sorry to jump in, but the amount of reach you have now, if you're working on a barrel, cool. You can use this. You can use it and get to it now. If you're not familiar, if you're not familiar with this style of heating, right? I've got this up at a fairly high temperature, 375-ish or so, but I can put that right on this B key and right on this C key and get that plenty hot and not melt my pearl. All right, I can't use my index finger because I've touched too many hot things, but you'll have to trust me, that's hot. And we'll see in a second. I'll see if I can heat it a little more, and we'll see if we can move the pad or pull the pad or something to that effect, since we're just sort of playing around here. All right, but I haven't torched the felt. I haven't melted a pearl any more than it already was. And that is movable, I believe. Yep, I can adjust that pad. I can move that pad around in there without much difficulty at all. We've even gotten this up. I know you can even potentially solder with air torches. I know we've done some experimenting with that. You've certainly got enough heat, even for the lead-free solder, which is what we use here. You've got enough heat to get to the melting point of that, depending on what sort of solder operation you're working with, which might save you some lacquer here and there too.
Yeah.
But some alternatives there, certainly, and certainly with the air torch, particularly in these spots where you're surrounded by multiple things you're trying to heat. The other thing that we've gotten to use, and I mentioned this in talking to you guys beforehand, was talking a little about the idea of using some induction heat. And what we've done on that is just a split tip soldering gun, right? This is actually a fairly powerful one. This is a recent soldering gun, a 200 watt soldering gun that we picked up. It comes with a solid tip, which we then turn around. I'll put this on the overhead, which we then turn around and split the ends, right? Kind of round this off a little bit. And then you have the ability, this acts like, if you're familiar with a pad cup heater, a Votop pad cup heater, this acts in a very similar sort of fashion, right? You're heating with an electronic current. So back to my C key here, if I can get that going and sort of give this a few seconds, right? You're heating the thing up by sending a current through it. For smaller woodwinds, for clarinets, piccolos, oboes, this sort of thing is absolutely amazing. For saxophones, it's a little harder for two reasons. One is that, yeah, okay. Trust me, it's hot, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure the graduates are laughing hysterically right now and saying he still hasn't figured out how not to touch hot things. But that's absolutely the truth. With a powerful enough soldering gun, that didn't take very long on the small key. There are two kind of downsides. One, obviously, if I go to do my low B flat, I may be here a little longer, right? Downside number two is that it doesn't work through lacquer. Right, so if you're dealing with a saxophone with lacquered key work, that's out. If you're dealing with a flute, a piccolo, an oboe, anything with plated key work, beautiful. But anything with lacquer on it, you're going to be struggling. And I think going back to then again, since I have my advantage, I didn't have to worry about burning lacquer on keys this morning with my torch. Back to our air torch friend here, right? That's going to be even less. That's going to be another benefit of using something like that, is you're less likely to toast the lacquer on the key you're working with, which, depending on the instrument you're working with, can be an inconvenience or a disaster.
Yes.
You know, and on some instruments it can be a multiple $100 or $1,000 disaster that you don't want to cause. So, you know, I hope that I wanted to mention those couple of things quickly as part of this discussion, because so much of what we do is a heat control game, and different ways, different things in your toolbox that can allow you to control the heat differently are going to make all the difference for you. Comments?
Yeah,
questions?
absolutely. I mean, if I can just, Mark, as I'm hearing you talk, it's really great to imagine if I was a student at Western Iowa Tech and to hear your how you're coming into each of these things. I still don't know exactly which shellac you like, or which heat source, but that's I see that as the kind of learning, like I think that's what I was saying about your school and your program and you is that I can see that, I know that that's the way you're teaching. You know, here are all the options. This is what you might run into, and then of course everyone's going to give their preference at some point. But yeah,
I've
we can see that comes through.
Yeah, I feel like I've gotten pretty good at hiding my favorites. I mean, there are a few things, and there are a few things that I will, you know, I tell the students, I try to stay away from always or never sort of statements. Right? There are very few things that I will say, you know, never do this, all, you know, because situations change, and as I said, I have the knowledge that I am sending everybody out to 20 different shops, and every one of those shops is going to have their favorites and their preferences, and they're all probably going to be different from mine. You know, I have a few things that drive me nuts. I still maintain that if you're gluing the same material to the same material, specifically cork. If you're piggybacking cork, I will find you. I will come and find you and rip your diploma off. Not that point, but there are a couple little things that I have my pet peeves on. I say you will not do this while you're here, and I prefer that you not do it afterwards. But beyond that, you're right. It's a lot of what we do is here's one way to do it. Now here's another way to do it. Now, what if you don't have this tool? Here's even another way to do it. Because of the variety of shops we have in our business.
Yeah.
Curt, how are we on time at this point?
You know, Mark, I think we could wrap this up and let you get back to work if I know you got some students, you got a whole bunch of.
I know we didn't really get to, we didn't get really in some ways talking to adjusting and padding. I will say real quick, I also really, just in working with these for a few minutes yesterday and today, I'm a fan on these as well. We have kind of a homemade tool that's similar, but it doesn't look as pretty and it's not as durable, I'm sure, as the pad slicks that you sent, but they are, I can see there being a long future for these as well.
Cool.
So thank you for all of that, and for your continued work in sort of put all of you at, not just Curt, but all of you at MusicMedic. And one of the things that I talk about with the students quite a bit is we're pretty lucky at this point in sort of the history of repair technicians. We have people who have actively worked for a long time and are still actively working to think of new ways to do things, to push something forward, to do something different. And that has been you guys from day one. And it's a benefit for all of us in the field and all of us entering the field to know that you're still coming up with stuff and you're still looking at how can we do this better. And we're not just, we're not limited to what's out there. We know that there's more coming, and I look forward to the email saying, hey, look what we came up with next, because it's always interesting. But thank you on that, and for putting all that out there, and it's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah,
thank you. That's we are trying to push forward, and I'm lucky to have some great people here, and I guess by way of wrapping it up, I want to say thank you for coming out here, and thanks for doing this. And I can see I can see a benefit of going and studying. I didn't get the benefit of going to repair school, right? I just kind of started out and made a bunch of mistakes. And sorry if you're one of the early ones, but I kind of went out and just went at it. But man, there's holes in my knowledge that I would really like to have hit the ground running, so to speak, and coming from your program and seeing how you do it. I mean, just to look at the different types of shellac and fitting a pad like we did today, there's a lot to know there, and there's a lot of hands-on tangible stuff that that you can impart, you can show people, and it's great to see you do it. And we want to get you back on here and have another discussion and talk more about whatever it is that you want to talk about. So we'll do that. And thank you for coming out here. Thank you guys. Thanks, Matt and Rich, for being here and all you're doing. And for those people that are out there tuned in, thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you next Wednesday at our next Wednesday Wisdom.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
We're still live. Keep waving. Keep waving.